Welcome to Building Fortunes Radio. Make sure you check us out at buildingfortunesradio.com. Along with our marketing partners, we're here to help our PM Marketing Network Lead customers build their businesses and make the world a better place. At Building Fortunes, we know how much your business means to you and the people important to you. So spread the word, tell a friend, join our newsletter, and go make a difference in your world. Now on to our show with your host, Peter Mingles.
Hello, everyone. Peter Mingles here. You're listening to us on Building Fortunes Radio. That's www.buildingfortunesradio.com. For some of you that might be first-time listeners, because we have some new guests, as well as people that might be familiar with this because you just have a really bad memory, my name is still Peter Mingles. We run this radio show with a good friend of ours. His name is always Scott Johnson. And the way this whole thing got started was about 5 years ago. I did a radio show with a gentleman named Roger Van Vlissingen, who is a critic on MLM, and we started to talk about some things because he had some really solid critical things to talk about relative to MLM. And Scott Johnson had given me a call afterwards and said, you know what, Peter, there's something that people don't really talk a lot about. And I said, what's that, Scott? And he said, it's the MLM tool scam. And I was not sure if what he was referring to the tool scam was the same thing that I would be thinking he was referring to as a tool scam. So I asked. And the reason why I said I wasn't sure, see, I had joined Amway 3 separate times. And the first time I joined it, I was bombarded with these cassette audio tapes. That tells you how long time ago it was. And there was so much of a focus on recruiting new people and buying extra tapes so I can give them to all the new recruits that I was going to recruit. I was like, I'm spending more money on these cassette tapes than I am on the products. I want to learn more about products. Now, my background, by the way, was in direct sales. So recruiting for me was not going to be a problem. So I just said, I don't need the recruiting thing. I just need the sales thing. I want to know about how much these things are and whatever. Got to come to the next function. So eventually I realized that, I think you guys are more interested in the functions and these tapes and the profits that are generated than you are from your Amway business. Is really kind of weird. So I quit. And then I joined again because I figured maybe I just had the wrong conclusion. So I gave him another shot. And then I came to the same conclusion, so I quit. And then the third time, I told the guy why I'm not going to join him. And I said, because you guys are making all this money on these books, tapes, and functions, and this is a scam. And I don't know if I used the word scam or not, but I just said, I don't want any part of it. I'm talented enough to be able to generate my income. I don't want to rip people off because somebody's getting ripped off by the tool scam. And he, no. I said, Jim, as soon as I find out it's a tool scam, I'm out of here. Well, it took me a couple of months of, the same thing, to find out and confirm it was a tool scam. So he didn't, I'm not going to say he lied, but I'm going to say he didn't tell me the truth. So the reality was I quit. And that was the third time, and then that was it. So when Scott started telling me about his story, I knew we were talking about the same thing. So I was always very frustrated with Amway that they actually allowed that to happen. So I said, Scott, you're right. Let's do a couple of radio shows. And one thing led to another, and we started to do this radio show. And we usually have a whole bunch of updates on what's going on with the industry, and sometimes we have guests. And we had a guest last week, and I'm going to let Scott do the rest of the introductions, but we have her back. And then we have a new guest today. But the most important thing is I want to just reference and say thanks to Scott, because if it wasn't for Scott, we wouldn't have these guests. All the tireless work that he does on the stuff that he does when he's not on the radio show, and the research that he does as well, and all the other cool things that he's put us in front of, as well as making me stay sharp, because I'm always looking for things that we could talk about on the radio show itself. So Scott Johnson, thanks for being here.
Hey, Peter, thanks for having me. This is great. And just so the listeners can be entertained as we talk as well, Peter has a website called flaglerbeach.tv. And if you go in the upper right-hand corner, there's a place that says Critter Cam, and there's right now 4 raccoons eating the food that he accidentally dropped. Last week, I think we saw 6 deer at one time in his backyard, so it's pretty cool. And it's just a live camera that he has in his backyard. So you're right, Peter. You may not have wanted to call Jim that you referred to a liar, but I will. He was a liar because there's 2 ways of lying. You can either say something that's false, or you can leave out something that's a material fact that's in the interest of the person listening, and it can be left out. Either way, to me, it's a lie. In fact, I believe that's referred to as business fraud. I'm not a lawyer, but to me, that's business fraud. And certainly both of us are pro-MLM if it's done right. And as you mentioned before, the books, tapes, and functions, it also includes, in today's world, phone apps, voicemail, website access. All these are things that the upline charge to, train and motivate you, so to speak. And they make a lot of money, many more times from that than they do from the Amway business. And I've got some websites that actually proves that. It's statements from former people that were at those higher levels, and then they would make statements after they got kicked out, indicating that, oh, yeah, I made, 5 times or 10 times or whatever the number is. It's still a lot more than what they were making with what they were promoting, right? They were promoting Amway and the products and the marketing plan and the bonus plan, and they just somehow forgot to mention that most of their money comes from the tools. Now, not all MLMs have tool scams. The ones that do, to me, that's the biggest problem because it's just massive losses on the part of each individual distributor that's paying into it. It's only the top 1% that make the profit from the tools. The other 99+% are paying into that, and they don't make profit from it. So it's a big problem. Now, not all MLMs have that issue, but most MLMs that I've looked at appear that they have the second issue, which is lack of sales to retail customers. And we're not talking downline here. We're talking about, non-distributor, or in the case of Amway, they now call them IBOs, independent business owners. And you'll see all kinds of names out there, brand ambassador. There's just all kinds of different names. But basically they're distributors, to use the generic term, and they're independent contractors, so they're not employees. They don't get paid any vacation or benefits or overtime or anything. It's all, 100% commission. So, that's the relationship. Is you're not a Amway employee. You're an Amway independent contractor who's either going to make money or not make money, depending on what you can sell and the downline that you can build up over time. So that's kind of the big picture. We had a guest on here last week, Pacee Bean, who had a little bit of a connection challenge at the end of the call, unfortunately, because she brought up a great topic that I don't think we've covered much on this show, and it's the names list. And Pacee, if you could just kind of go back and pick up where we left off as far as the names list and your experience with that after you stopped being active, or maybe it was after you quit, whatever the case might be. If you could just kind of back up a little bit and talk about that. Go right ahead.
Yeah, sure, and thank you again for letting me come on. So, again, just I guess for any of the listeners that weren't listening last week, I was involved in Amway for probably about 6 months back in May 2018 till the end of the year for 2018. And one of the first tasks when I signed up was they want you to make your list. They like to go by your ABC list, A being your close friends, your family, B leading your acquaintances, and C being just anybody you run into. So one of the first things they like to do to help create your list is by taking your contacts in your phone and putting it into an Excel file. Well, I use my cell phone for work a lot of times and for some of the professional organizations I'm in. And so as a civil engineer, I work a lot with public agents, people with the city, and they're in my phone. So I remember creating these lists and already telling my upline, oh, well, I need to get rid of a lot of these because these are, people high up in the county level, in the city's level, and I don't need to be contacting them. And they were very kind of hesitant. They're like, well, you don't want to delete them, but you can focus on those people later on. It's like, okay. Well, one thing it took me a while to remember is at this point, fast forward to early 2019, I have left the business, ghosted my uplines, and all of a sudden I start getting a couple of text messages from, these were more of acquaintances, people I knew in the industry, and they said, hey, I've been contacted by this person who was my upline. They said you're in a business with them and that you recommended me to work with them. And that's when I started to freak out because I forgot at the beginning when I was creating this list, they copied it, or it was I emailed them the list as well. Because they said that, oh, we'll make sure, like, if you have any questions, need help or anything. And so they basically took, after I left the business, calling everybody on my list. And so I had to go and tell some of these people, I was like, yes, I was in business with them, but it wasn't a business that I agree with. And I didn't recommend them to talk with them, and saying that I didn't give them permission to contact you. And then I found out this happened to a couple of other people. One of my friends was too nice to say no and even met up with them, but thankfully didn't sign up. But I had to go and contact them because I was like, there are people high up in the county and the city in my phone that I have their office numbers for, and that is definitely not a reputation that I want to have, is for all these very professional people to think that they're getting spammed by me.
Yeah, that's a tremendous thing. In fact, our upline told us that you can consider your names list like your capital, right? Capital being money, because most businesses require a lot of capital. You know, if you start up a traditional business, you may have to buy or lease a storefront. You may have to, buy a bunch of inventory, computers, all these kinds of things to put together a conventional business. And Amway is so much superior. This is according to the upline, of course, because you don't have those massive capital outlays, but your capital is your names list. That is, the source of where you're going to make money. It's not like a traditional business where you have a storefront and that's sort of the source of you making money, but it's the names on your list. And this is why I always tell people, whether they've been in Amway already or not, to contact everybody you know, and if it's even a very short and sweet message that, hey, Amway's a scam, don't go near it, that's fine, because at least at that point you'll be inoculating them so that if they do get contacted, and this is whether they were on your names list or not. I mean, if you were never in Amway and you don't even have a names list, you ought to make one and contact those people, because if you don't, chances are that at least one of them will get contacted by somebody. You may not even know that somebody, and then they're going to join, and then they're going to think of you, and they're going to call you and say, hey, would you like to join me in this great business? And so this is all part of getting the word out. Your names list is a perfect illustration of what we're talking about. I know at a job I used to work at, because they also told us now, contact the head honchos. Don't go low, go high, right? And so I contacted at the nuclear plant I used to work at, I contacted the plant manager and the vice president. And of course they both turned me down. But it was not a career-enhancing move, let's put it that way. In fact, the vice president called me into his office a few days later and said, my wife is really embarrassed. She thought that, I was running out of money and we have some financial problems, and she became very nervous that, that something was really wrong with us financially. And then another time, a little bit later, I contacted a guy that worked for me, and he went, to our bosses and complained, and guess what? I got called into the vice president's office again to get, chewed out, let's say. So it's not a career-enhancing move to do this, especially when, people are really against it, and a lot of people are against it. And, of course, back then I didn't know that. This is almost 30 years ago. And I didn't know that, of course, at the time. I was just doing what my upline said to do, and getting those high-powered people contacted. So, in a lot of different ways, it is really a bad thing as far as giving up control of those people. And it's even used not just like you when you quit, but it's even used like if you had just gone inactive, they could have picked up your names list and started contacting people, and then when they found somebody that wanted to join, they could put them under you. They would be in your downline in an effort to try to get you re-involved. That's another tactic that's used, and we were taught to do that. I was active for 12 years in Amway, so I kind of know what I'm talking about. That names list is a big deal, and even if you've never been in Amway, make a names list of everybody you know, and just contact them and let them know, hey, this thing is a tool scam. This thing is an illegal pyramid because there's little to no retail sales by most distributors, and it's just a really, really interesting thing and a very valuable thing, as far as the upline is concerned, to leverage in the future because they don't know everybody in the world. They only know so many people, and eventually the people they know that they're in Amway, so they have to go cold contact people, people that they're perfect strangers to them in order to find prospects. So a names list like this is extremely valuable to them for a lot of different reasons. So
and Scott,
anything more?
Scott, can I jump in and ask Pacee for a question? Pacee, the mechanism by which they got the list, I'm unfamiliar with. I'm an older guy, so I use a phone, but I don't really know that much about my phone. So did they export it? Is there like a feature where you can export it and put it into like an Excel spreadsheet, or did you rewrite your contacts list?
There was an app that they recommend to use that allowed you to export your phone contacts into an Excel. So very little hand work, which is probably why they recommended it. But then again, that's why I had told them, I was like, well, I have to go through this list still because, like I said, I'm not going to contact the mayor's office of Houston. I'm not going to contact Pizza Hut that's saved in my phone. But they were very adamant of like, no, you always want to keep those numbers available.
Now, let's talk. I'm glad you mentioned that there was an app that they did it because that made it really easy. If you had 5,000 contacts and you had to write them down, that'd be real hard. But if you had 5,000, all it is push a couple of buttons and they have your 5,000 contacts. Let's talk about a little bit on the insidious nature, and this is like a really on the serious side. If I were your employer and then you're still working for me and I'm getting a phone call about you being associated with Amway, I'm starting to question your loyalty, meaning like maybe she's looking for somewhere else. So when it comes to promotions, if I had, and we have a guest on the phone, her name is Elaine. If I had a choice of Elaine, who I think is loyal to the company, or Pacee, who I know has been dabbling around with something else, whether that something else is Amway or whatever, between me and you, being on top of the employment pyramid, I'm picking the person I think is more loyal. So there's a real insidious nature to this. It wasn't just an innocent thing, an awkward moment. These could be career devastating things whether you see it or not. So I think that's just one point that I really want to make as well, Scott. This isn't just some little thing. This could be career devastating in certain circumstances when taken the wrong way, because the person who's getting that phone call, if it's that VP of your company and he doesn't know that, or if it's a client that you're working with who you might have a job with or a job opportunity to work some other time, and this buffoon is calling up saying whatever they're saying, that's a reflection that they're going to always remember about you. So I don't know if you had any harmful effects, Pacee, but it almost doesn't matter. It could have happened, and it may have happened. We'll just never know. It's hard to prove one way or another. So I'll let you comment on that, Pacee.
No, I completely agree, and that was my thought too. Is to this day, I still do not know if they contacted anybody of a much higher status in career status than myself, and if it has affected myself. I will say, even as a young engineer in Houston, I have been very successful in my career, and my name is fairly well known around our community, so I hope that nothing has halted me in any way of my career growth. Yes, whenever I found out that they were using my contact list, I definitely felt a sense of being violated. Those are my contacts. Those are my connections, not yours.
Right, and just because they haven't used it yet doesn't mean they won't use it in the future, because we all know that, if they are going to use a list, they might use a list 5 years from now. So it's never really over, It's never really over. So, but this is a great point, Scott, so I'm glad you brought Pacee back.
Yeah, that's a really good point you made, Peter. I think it's less likely going forward, just, as time passes, they move on to other people, and probably your names list will be forgotten. However, if they get desperate and run out of names themselves, they might say, well, I've got these names from Pacee. So I think it's never over. I think it's less likely going forward. And another thing besides them saying that this represents the capital or the money of Amway's business, it also represents hope. This is what we were told over and over again. Don't ever run out of names on your names list, because the names also represent hope. If you have names on your list, that means you still have people that you can contact and have that hope of them getting in your business and start putting the group together. But if you run out of names, then you ran out of hope also, and then you'll, likely quit. They would actually teach that. So make sure you keep your names list always populated. Never run out of names. Always be adding to it. Whenever you meet anybody, make a note of their name and get their phone number or whatever. Even if you don't contact them right away, contact them at some point. But the main thing is don't ever run out of names on your names list, because then you say, well, gee, I'm done. I can't do anything. It's like a business running out of money, and it has to be folded up. It's the same concept here with the names. So any last remarks you wanted to say there, Pacee? I really appreciate you coming back.
No, I think I've finished my story time, and I appreciate y'all letting me come back and finishing that story.
Okay, well, you're welcome to stay on and make any comments along the lines. We're about to turn to Elaine to tell us a little bit about her and her story with Amway. And as a introduction, Elaine Hill is her name, and she's currently living in South Carolina. But when she was in Amway, she was in Oregon, and we're sort of like fourth cousins or something within the Amway business, because we had a common upline. At some point, it broke to different branches, but we both had at the top Dexter and Bertie Yeager, and then it came down to Don Wilson. That was Don and Nancy Wilson, and then Randy Haugen, Randy and Val Haugen. And then she went, her upline diamond was, I think it was Russ and Lisa Entz.
Russ Entz, yeah.
And then my upline under Haugen's was Bruce and Wendy Anderson. So, Elaine, why don't you just take it from there? Tell us a little bit about yourself and, what were you doing at Oregon at that time and how you got back to South Carolina and what your experience was, when were you in, how long, some of your experiences, but go ahead and just start us with a kind of an introduction. Go right ahead.
Okay, yeah, I'm from Oregon. We moved here recently. This is where my husband's from, so that's why we're in South Carolina now. But it was in the mid-'90s when I was involved in Amway. It was 94 when we signed up. I was with my ex-husband at the time. We were just starting out. He had just started a job. That was his first real job out of college. And we had moved. We had been living down in Eugene, which is where he'd been going to college. And for this job, we had to move up to Portland. And we had a baby. So we were just starting out. And there was a coworker of his in his office named Bob. And I'll talk a lot about Bob. he was a character. He got into Amway, and he was somebody who was probably 10, 15 years older than us. He was more established in his career and his life and everything, and he was somebody that my husband looked up to and wanted to emulate. And so there was a lot of manipulation, honestly, on Bob's part with him. And one of the things that happened was Bob joined Amway, and then he started recruiting people in this office, and there ended up being 4 of them that all joined up, and we were one of those 4. And you brought up a good point about employers not really liking people being in the Amway, because they actually had a problem with their boss. One of the things that they were told to do was, like, put all these goals everywhere where you could see them, right? And so you were supposed to have all these pictures of, like, what you were wanting, mansions or fancy cars or whatever. You're supposed to have them everywhere. And one of the things that he did was he started putting stuff in his car. Like, he had some sort of motivational, he got these little stickers, and he put them on his steering wheel and on the dashboard or on the glove box. And I can't remember what they said, but it had something to do with like goals that they go diamond or whatever. And one day he went to some sort of a meeting, and his boss was in his car and saw this and told him that he needed to take that out of his car because if he had a client in the car, it didn't look good for that. He didn't want anybody to think that he had something else going on besides his actual job.
What line of business was that?
It was a sales company. They did they sold promotional and business materials to other companies.
Okay, yeah. And I think that follows up right with what Pacee and Peter were saying as far as, you know, your image with your job and people around your job. Go right ahead.
Yeah, so that when you brought that up, it reminded me of that and how he had to take those out of his car because his boss was not happy about it. But anyway, when we joined up, Bob had recruited another person, and then they were signing us up under this other person. And they came over to the house where we lived in an apartment, and they did their little presentation. And I wasn't particularly interested. I mean, I was just I was there, and they were drawing the little circles on the whiteboard and stuff. And he wanted to do it because Bob did it, and he wanted to do everything Bob did. So I was like, well, okay, I wasn't against it or anything. And so they came over with the kit that we had to buy. And I'm pretty sure that when we opened up the kit and paid for it and everything, our direct was there too and helping us get everything signed up. And in the kit was a lot of brochures and catalogs and stuff. And I'm looking through them, and there was so much stuff in there. And I was pretty impressed, you know. I was like, wow, they sell everything. And I was still thinking of it as something where we would, you know, have customers and sell things to. And so I was like, well, this is pretty cool. I can take these catalogs. I can show them to, you know, my parents or other family members or whatever. And if they want to buy something, they can. And then we'll make a little bit of a commission off of it. That's what I thought it was going to be. And they said, oh, no, we don't do that. And they were very, very contemptuous of that idea of selling products to customers. They said, we do not sell anything. We sign people up, and then people buy from themselves. And so, yeah, there was never any dishonesty about where, you know, who was buying what or pretending you have customers or pretending you have retail sales. They flat out said from the beginning, you do not have customers.
Yeah,
you
that's
only buy
interesting.
for yourself. Yeah.
I think when we were talking earlier, I think you were saying something about bumping into some worldwide dream builders people and making a point with them that we do not sell. You know, this is the Ints group.
I would hear that. Yeah, I would hear that at the functions too. They'd always just kind of like, oh no, we don't sell products, we sell the dream. Yeah,
and my upline, which is a little different than yours, but not that much different. Like I mentioned at the beginning, they would sort of emphasize selling products like my mom used to drink her tea. We used to make fun of her for, waving a used tea bag over the hot water, and that was how she made tea. It was just a little bit of tea in the water, and the same was true with any function we went to. It was sort of mentioned, but it wasn't really promoted. It was just sort of mentioned that, hey, you can sell this stuff, but there was never any sit down and saying, okay, what's your retail volume this month? How can I help you sell some more products? There was never any of that. It was all sort of do it on your own. But again, it wasn't emphasized, even though there is a written Amway rule that says every single month you're supposed to have either 50 PV, which in today's dollars is about $150. Back in the 90s, it was about $100. So it'd be $100 a month in retail sales, to non-distributors, or 10 different customers buying any amount. You could do either one of those to qualify for your downline volume bonus. If you didn't have that, you weren't supposed to be paid your downline volume bonus. Now, for the roughly 150 months that I was in Amway active, I don't believe I ever came close to either one of those criteria, but they never missed sending me a downline volume bonus check, which were never very large, but, it's really the principle of it more than the amount of money. But they always paid, even though we didn't meet the rule. And I'm convinced the reason they pay is because if they didn't, then you would just sort of lose faith with the business. You would just, be losing so much money and not getting anything back, even though we were just getting a fraction of what we were spending back. Right. At least it was something. It wasn't zero. It was something, and it was enough to keep people.
And another thing that they did, and I don't know, and I've been thinking about this. Well, when you sign up, because you buy that kit, and it was $150 when we signed up. Well, that kit was worth 100 points and almost the same amount of the BV, which is what you got paid on. So just by buying that kit, you were going to get a check back. Well, then they would also do things when you first signed up, like when they would have us switch your long distance. Remember when all the long distance companies were competing?
Yep, MCI.
And that's the one. I couldn't remember which one it was. But there was one of them that Amway partnered with. So if you switched over to MCI within that first month, you would get another 100 points. But this is a one-time thing. You don't get the 100 points every month. You just get it for switching over. And then there was something else. There were several things that you could do right away, and you would get a whole bunch of points for. Like the Ambox. Remember Ambox?
Yes, that was the precursor. Yeah, that was the precursor to Communicate.
There were several things that they would get you to sign up for, and then they would give you this big point bonus. So when you got your first check, it was a decent-sized check. So and that's how they kind of get you in this mindset of, oh, wow, this is really working. I'm going to make money. But you're not going to get those checks every month because you don't get those points every month.
Exactly, yeah. And we're saying decent being, I don't know, somewhere maybe $25 to $50, something like that. But it was real money. It was, and that kit that we buy, that came with some products. I think most of them were sample size. So that's where the PV came from for the kit. Now, by Amway rule, and they don't tell you this when you sign up, but by rule, your sponsor is supposed to tell you that you don't have to buy any products. You can just pay the $50 or $60, whatever it is now, to join Amway and not buy any products. Yeah, you can get the
productless kit, yeah.
But most of the time,
really push the kits,
most of the time people aren't even told that option. And of course, if you're just joining, you don't know what the rules say. So, as far as you know, the kit is required when you're signing up. That's just another one of those, misleading things that they do over and over again. But go right ahead with your story. This is great.
Oh. So, like I said, we signed up. The first thing that they said, and it was probably that first day when we got our kit, was that there was a function coming up in Seattle. It was called Dream Weekend. They had it in Seattle every year. And that we needed to go to it. And I said, well, when is it? And they told me the dates. And I said, well, we won't be able to go. I said, that's our daughter's first birthday is that weekend, and I've got plans for, a birthday party with our family. And I assumed that was the end of it. They said, here's this thing. I said, no, we can't go because I've got plans. Well, being as my husband is working with Bob every day, Bob is just working on him, telling him, you have to go to this function, you have to go to this function. And he would come home and bring it up to me, and I would say, no, we've got plans. It's, it's our child's first birthday. That's a big deal. And so Bob's telling him, well, you could have it, some other weekend. And he says, she's a baby. She's not going to know you're not there on her birthday. And I was so mad about this. And then he started saying, well, why don't you go to the function just by yourself? And he was going to do that. He'd come home and he's like, well, Bob's telling me I need to just go by myself. And, we can just, if it's important for you to be here on her birthday, and then we could just have her party the next week. And I said, no. I said, I'm going to have her party, and everybody's going to be there except you, and I'm going to make sure that everybody in my family and everybody in your family knows that this Amway thing is more important to you than your child. And he.
This is the moment where you became the negative Amway wife. Now, there's also negative Amway husbands, so I'm not picking on the women here, but this is definitely a break between the husband and wife.
Yeah.
But so go ahead. I just wanted to kind of slip that in there.
So we did not go, and he did not go, and we had our party, and we ended up going to the next one, which was I think they were in the spring, the fall, and the summer, and I remember there was 3 of them a year that we would go to, and 2 of them were in Salt Lake, and then the one in the summertime was in Seattle. But that was my first issue with Bob. And and he would drive me insane because whenever we would have conflicts like this, and then another conflict, and this is I told you this when we were talking before, was he wanted me to throw everything out of my house, just everything we had, and then completely replace everything with Amway products. And I said I didn't have a problem with replacing things as we used them up, but I was not going to just throw stuff in the dumpster that wasn't used up and then just buy a whole household full of stuff. Who could afford to do that? I couldn't afford to do that. Bob couldn't afford to do that. But and so he would, and because they work together, he's in his ear all the time, all day, every day, telling him stuff like, you need to be a man, and you need to take charge, and you need to, tell your wife this is how it's going to be. And so he would come home and tell me that Bob is saying this to him, and I'm like, you know what, Bob can come here and tell me that to my face. Bob won't do that because he's a coward. Bob
I
never,
like you.
ever
said
so
much,
anything like that to my face.
But I like you so much. You're great. You're great. Now, they were also telling your husband, I don't know if he ever mentioned this to you, or maybe you heard this at a function, that you need to be submissive to your husband. Did that ever come up?
No. That was in the book I was telling you I'd read from Bertie Yeager. She had written a book, and she had put that in the book, and it made me just go, ew, gross.
Yeah, that's pretty common at the major functions, too, is they'll bring that up. Now, again, different groups do things a little bit differently, like we talked about before with the emphasis on retail sales. I mean, your upline said, heck no, don't do it at all. And mine just kind of said, yeah, go ahead and do it, and never talked about it again, really. They would bring it up like at the monthly seminars and say, hey, this is on sale this month, from Amway, and this is, great stuff to make extra profit, from your customers. But that was the end of it. I mean, there was no teaching on how to sell. There was no, okay, this is how you sell the products. You describe the features, the benefits, the, whatever it is, the concentration and how it goes for so long compared to, other products and why it's such a great value. There was none of that. And, it's you'll get some of that stuff from the Amway Corporation, but never from the upline. I mean, it was just so rarely mentioned that they didn't even get close to going into those kinds of things as far as how to sell. So sorry to interrupt again, but go right ahead.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine. So we were heavily involved, I would say, for 3 years. heavily involved. This makes me just cringe now thinking about it, because we had signed up my parents, several members of my family, close family friends and stuff, and got them all involved in it. And, we were going to all the functions, and it was just every weekend was something, because we had the seminar and rally. That was once a month. We had, the open meetings where they would, usually rent a hotel room. There were several times where at our apartment complex we had a clubhouse that you could have meetings or parties in, and we would have people there. That was every month. They would do these dream building things where if there were they had the Street of Dreams every year. That was one thing that they told everybody to go to. Or if there was even just some big mansion that was for sale and had an open house, and they would say, okay, you need to go and check out this house and that kind of stuff, so you can focus on your dreams and think about how much you want to build this business. You can have this big mansion, that kind of stuff. It was all the time. Did you know at the time, or when did you find out that number one, not selling products is actually the definition of an illegal pyramid? That's not according to Scott. That's according to the Federal Trade Commission. It was never brought up. Yeah, it was never brought up. They wouldn't tell you that. But did you ever realize that even after you left, that, hey, without retail sales, this is an illegal pyramid? No, not until I started looking at this anti-MLM movement online just recently.
Right, and the same thing with the tools, I assume. You didn't realize they were making most of their profit from the tools versus from what they promoted, which was Amway.
We did, and that was the catalyst for when we finally left.
So you did find out. How did you find out that information?
I really can't tell you. He found it out, and I don't know who told him. If he told me who told him, I've forgotten. But he found out about it, about how that was where they were making their money from, was from all these tapes and books and stuff, and he was deep into it. He was getting 5 or 6 tapes a week, and he was getting at least one book a week, and we were doing all these functions. And when he found out about it, and at the time that he found out this, we had stepped back a lot, and then that was just the end of it. He was really mad that he felt like he had been deceived, and he also found out some stuff about our diamonds, the INSAs, and how they were not wealthy like they would pretend to be, and they were having some pretty serious money problems. And so he was like, this whole thing is a lie and all that, and so that was just the end of it for us. But at that time, I had pretty much stepped completely away from it, and he was still kind of going to stuff, and I was done. But there were so many red flags about that subject, and whenever we would do these things, and it was mostly the wives would put this meeting on once a month, and I can't remember what they were called. It was like a home meeting or something, and we would get together at somebody's house, and it was mainly for new people that had just signed up, and we would put out a lot of foods and snacks and drinks and stuff that were from Amway, and it was for people to try, so then they would order it. And we did this quite a bit. Well, one time, the INSAs came to Portland, and they were staying at a hotel, and they got this big suite that had a separate, a living room and a kitchen area. And we were going to put on one of these little meetings at their hotel. And it was me and probably 4 or 5 other of my upline women that had made all this food that was the Amway food. And I had made a bunch of desserts that were from pie and cake mixes and stuff. And there were other snacks, chips, cookies, drinks, things like that. And when we got there, and we were the ones setting all this up, we were in this hotel suite, and we were setting up this little kitchen area. We had brought all the food. We had brought the little paper plates and cups and everything. Somebody had brought a bunch of chairs from wherever he got chairs and was putting them in this little living room. And the woman that was my direct upline made a comment to me about, oh, I'm so glad that you brought all these desserts. They look great, And she goes, and don't worry about paying. I already paid for you. And I said, paid what? And she said, oh, well, they're charging $5 a person to come to this meeting. And I was like, number one, why would you charge somebody to come to this meeting? And number two, we're the ones providing the food. Why would we be paying? And I was really confused. And she says, oh, well, it's to help pay for the cost of the room. And so they're bringing all these people in, and we were there for hours, and we were serving all this food. The INSAs didn't do anything. And we, like I said, we had bought all this stuff. We had made all this stuff. We had brought it. And they're collecting $5 at the door. We didn't get any of that money. It was to pay for this fancy hotel room. They obviously couldn't afford to pay for it themselves, but they wanted to show off, oh, look at us, we can have this fancy hotel suite. But they got the money for it from the people they had invited to this meeting.
Yeah, there's been differing opinions. Peter, I think we've had a guest on the show before that has talked about how when the upline comes in, they pay for all their own stuff. But I've heard things like Elaine is mentioning that that people chip in. In fact, even just when you pay your money to go to the monthly seminar, even if you have, like she said, a meeting room at a hotel, or maybe it's a high school auditorium or wherever you hold the meeting, yes, there is some rental cost to that, but I think there's a whole lot of money left over, and I think some of that money left over goes to pay for their travel costs, whether it's their airline or their hotel or whatever, and that they really do clean up on this, and these people are treated as if they were literally royalty, right, Elaine?
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
they're rock.
when the entities come in, I mean, you may as well bow down. I mean, they're the greatest person that ever lived, and you are just so lucky to be in their mere presence, even if they never say anything to you or look at you. Just to be around them is such an honor for you, and that's just how high they're built up like this. And that all goes into the whole don't ask questions, don't ever, doubt anything, just believe everything and accept everything. Don't ever, ask anything that would be considered a question of doubt. Always be supportive, always be positive, right? PMA, positive mental attitude, all that stuff. And so, Peter, did you have anything that you wanted to comment on or ask Elaine while we're at this point?
No, not at all. Matter of fact, it's just really good information. And the idea of, you have all these little indentured servants, if you will, that are sitting there. And I don't know, Elaine, how much time did it take you to put all the food together? There's a big difference between buying something in a box and then you have to actually prepare it, schlep it around, all that sort of stuff. And then, how many hours was that involved? Hours and dollars.
Yeah. It was. But yeah,
like several. I would imagine several hours to be like Betty Crocker, and then you have to prepare it, and then you have to store it, and then you have to make sure that nobody in your family eats it, and then right? Yeah. And then, like I said, we took everything to that hotel suite. We set it up. We brought the plates, everything. We brought the chairs. And then they came in because they were like hiding out in the bedroom part of the suite during all of this. And then when people started showing up, that's when they go to the door and they're, oh, look at what we've done. Yeah. So Scott, and I know this is totally inappropriate to say, but we're talking about reparations for slavery, if you will, but slavery didn't end in 1865 or whatever it was with June 19th or Juneteenth. Slavery was still very common in Amway, probably still is today, where these people are getting these people to work for free, like literally work for free, and then some. So then they're bringing all their stuff in and they're doing all these types of things. And the whole concept is this perverse edification. Perverse edification. I mean, misguided edification. So I don't want to slam these people.
Well, you're so brainwashed. Like, oh, this is such an honor to be invited to this thing with the diamond, even though I'm doing all the work.
Right.
And they're getting paid for it.
And now I kind of understand that if somebody's coming to town and they're doing training for people in cross lines that they'll never get paid on because they're not part of their compensation plan. If they're helping out somebody else's organization, hey, it would be unfair for them to bear the expenses. But I'm sure there wasn't a lot of that stuff explained all the way around. And the idea that there was, I guess, the fake it till you make it approach, which is itself really misleading. And that's all I have to say about that. So I'll let you continue.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm kind of lost now.
There we go. Well,
let me just give my little input on that, because we used to regularly do the same thing, Elaine, at major functions where we would go in and actually help set up the stage. You know, there was only a small group that did that, and you know, we had that honor, quote unquote, to be asked to do that. And so we would go in, you know, several hours before anyone showed up, you know, for the meeting, even I think a day ahead of time, and just set up the stage, you know, all the different decorations, and, you know, we would actually make things, you know, go to the, you know, stores and buy different, you know, poster boards or confetti or whatever the thing was, and make these things, as well as bring desserts and other snacks, you know, for the upline, you know, which would generally be the platinums and above behind stage, so that during that weekend of the major function, anytime that they weren't out on stage doing something, they were behind stage, you know, eating and drinking the stuff that we made for them, of course, at our cost, and like Peter said, you know, at our time. But we were told you should be honored to do that because, you know, look at how big this group is, and, you know, you were the ones selected to do this. And so they would just make you feel special, not realizing that, you know, you were just getting lied to, is how I put it. I mean, you know, when you're running an illegal pyramid with hardly any retail sales, and you're running what I would consider RICO fraud with a tool scam, there's just nothing good about it. And they are really good liars, I'll tell you that. That's one thing I have to give them credit for, is being really good liars. So
Scott,
you did have some.
If I could just jump in one more time, only because many times there's always a religious overtone as well. So most of the time, this is the same stuff. Many of the I'm going to use the term "you people" or to Elaine, you know, but without condescending. This would be that many times people would do this stuff for church. You know, if there's a church, so if you were a religious person and you're already doing this for church, you've already been groomed for what it's like to bring the chairs and do the desserts and do that sort of stuff. So it was kind of par for the course, just a continuation of doing it. But now you're doing it for the Amway church, not necessarily for your upline church, as opposed to.
It was definitely run like a church. I would say you're spot on with that.
Okay. So you had mentioned that.
Of course, church isn't a scam either. I was going to say church isn't a scam either. Everybody pitches in, and, you know, but nobody's cleaning up on it as far as making money. It's all, you know, sort of a community thing. So it is similar. The optics are similar, Peter. I totally agree with you. But behind the scenes, it's completely different as far as, you know, who's profiting from it and that sort of thing. So just wanted to make that clear. I mean, it's but you're right. A church person would relate to this whole setup that we've been talking about as being very familiar, you know, externally. But go right ahead.
And I'll say that they did use religion a lot to manipulate people. When we were at the functions, their speeches were always, you know, oh, God has a plan for me, and God wanted me to do this, and blah, blah, blah. It was like being at a church sermon a lot of times.
And did you have a church service normally after the major functions set on Sunday morning?
I believe they have them, but I don't think we ever went to one.
Oh boy, that's like strike three now. Let me ask you this: did you guys ever? I never saw these, but I know I've seen them talked about, and I know that other groups used them. But they used to have stickers. And they were like little stickers on a big roll, and the upline would come over to your house, and they would find products that were not Amway products, and they would put a sticker that said something like negative product and put it on whatever that product is. Did you guys
I
ever
heard
use those?
about that. When we would go to the functions and the diamonds would be speaking, they would talk about stuff like that. But I never personally witnessed that. I did have a very kind of a funny experience with Bob about soap, and this went on for years. Years before we got into Amway, a couple years before, I had worked at a hotel. And while I worked there, they remodeled the hotel and they changed over their toiletries. So when they changed over the toiletries, they just stuck boxes and boxes of all the shampoos and lotions and soaps and stuff out in the hallway and said, whoever wants this can take it. And I worked the evening shift at this hotel, and so I'd get off work at like 10:30. And as I was leaving, there were still all these boxes of stuff just sitting in the hallway. It's been sitting there all day, and I was kind of asked around, anybody want any of this? And nobody did. So I took it all home. I had boxes and boxes of those little shampoo bottles and bars of soap, and I used that stuff for years. I had so much of it, and I had like 2 cases of these bars of soap. And they weren't, like normally in a hotel that's like a little tiny thin little bar of soap, but these were actually like full-size bars of soap. It was like Dial soap. And so I still had like a couple of boxes of it when we joined Amway. And he was like, they'll go over like what you're ordering and stuff, and, how come you're not ordering soap? And I said, I won't have to order soap for years. I've got tons of soap. And he's trying to tell me to throw it